It's up to his more. So once again, yesterday we learned Taf Chav Ches, and we learned that at a certain point, a husband can no longer be mefer the Naziris of his wife. And the question was, where was that point of no return? The Tanakama said, we wanted to Nizrak Allah Echad Min Adamim, because the Tanakama learned that then suspends the Isser to drink wine. And once the Nazir can drink wine, it's no longer considered Inu Nefesh. Thank you so much. It's no longer considered Inu Nefesh. And Vivalt is no longer considered Inu Nefesh. The husband could no longer be Mefer. Rabbi Kiva said, even at an earlier point, even if it was only Nishkatalel, Achas Mikol Abahemos, even if the Chatos was already shechted, even before the Zrika, which means it's still also for that person, for the Nazir to drink wine, we don't allow Hafara anymore because it's going to ruin the carbon Chatos. It's going to make the Chatos go Lipsul. And then we had a third Shita who held that Af B'Taglachas Hatahayra Yofer, even if everything was done and the woman's allowed to drink wine already, but she's before her haircut, the husband could be made for there as well, because he could say, he doesn't want his wife to cut her hair. And the machlokes was whether or not we can tell him, you have no right to say it bothers you if she cuts her hair, because you go wear a shape. And from there was spun off the whole shaila, if you can bring a raya from Mar Gemara, in fact, that a woman's allowed to wear a sheitel and she doesn't have to cover it. Okay. Then we have our new Mishnah, which we learned, which we'll start from again, because it's the shaila of chinuch. We learned that our ish mother as b'noi b'nazir, a man, a father could be mother his son v'naziris, ve'ena isha mader b'na. A woman could not, and we said that even if though a man could, if there's a protest either from the child himself or from the family, then he's ois nazir. And then we discussed what if he was mafresh karbonos, and then the Naziris was nisbatel. You could bring the shlomim and the oila, and the mechatas you have to take liyam melech. So let's start from the Gemara again. Ish in aval ishaloi. My timer. What's the reason why only a man could make Naziris for his son and not an isha? Rabbi Yochanan Amar halacha hi b'nazir. It's halacha l'Moshe Sinai. It doesn't require an explanation. It's halacha l'Moshe Sinai. But Rabbi Yosy b'Chanina Amar, I'm sorry. The family was protesting the Naziris. The family was megaleach this boy. Or the relatives were megaleach the child. No, even if the father's alive, the relatives have a right to protest. And the same thing, gilach or gilach is just a way of being moicha. It's a way of doing a ma'isa to show that you're rejecting the Naziris. The same way, if his kroivav could be moicha verbally and say we don't agree, they can also give this child a haircut, which demonstrates that they don't agree. They don't agree. Gilach was immediately. Yeah. So Dr. Gemara, Rabbi Yosy b'Chanina Amar, I didn't make it clear. It doesn't mean giluach, the karbanis giluach, and the process at the end of the year. So it means immediately. Yeah. Rabbi Yosy b'Chanina Amar, Rish Lakish, in the name of Rish Lakish, k'dei lachan choy b'mitzvahs, it's chinuch, and this creates a big tumult. The Maritzchis asks, I don't understand. A mitzvah that someone will surely have to do, the mitzvah of sukkah, the mitzvah of lulav, the mitzvah of tzitzis, there I understand why there's a chinuch. But there shouldn't be chinuch on something that mehechatesa will have to be. Mehechatesa is going to be a nazir. And naziris is something that is even shunned upon. You're not even supposed to be makabel naziris. So mehechatesa, that's something that you're supposed to be mechanach a kid with. And the Maritzchis writes that this is a very, very shver kasha. How could you say that chinuch applies to something that you don't even necessarily need to do long term? So the only thing that we could say to partially for emperor the kasher of the Martchias is to look at the Rosh. The Rosh is kedei lechan mitzvahs the Nazir siog leprecious. The father has to be mechanech his child in precious, in the restraint, in self-control. So therefore, kubi naziris there'd be an Indian to be mechanech your child with naziris. But the Martchias kasher is very, very strong. There shouldn't be a chiyuv of chinuch on something that's not necessarily going to ever happen, and there's no chiyuv to be mekabel naziris. If this chinuch, if this reason for being madir a child with naziris is chinuch, so the mother should also be responsible for the chinuch. A man is mechuyev to be mechanech his child of mitzvahs, and a woman is not mechuyev to be mechanech her children. There's no reason, you don't need an explanation. The halacha dictates what it is. You can't ask any questions. Another shlokish that it's based on chinuch afilu bitay. Why don't you have to be mechanech your daughter? So the there's no mitzvah of chinuch on your daughter. So let's go back to look at Tosfos to see what the parameters are for chinuch.
I have a feeling, Yosy, that back in the day, it wasn't uncommon to see a lot of people becoming Nazirim.
Why?
I seem to recall that they, especially during Bais Sheni, there was a lot of sects and people going overboard with some kind of frumkeit. There's something called the scenes. The people, the people who they think wrote the Dead Sea Scrolls. There were a lot of people that kept things much stricter. In other words, there
when Moshe Rabbeinu died, all of Klal Yisrael, or much of Klal Yisrael, was Makabel Nazirs at that time, and there was a Naziris La'olam because they didn't have the base of Mikdash, so they couldn't yet discharge. They couldn't even discharge it. So there were periods of time where there were a lot of Nazirim, but I still don't think that there would be a need to be mechanech your child in Naziris, because it's still an optional Kabbalah.
What I'm suggesting is that this was written during a time where it wasn't uncommon for people to become Nazirim, and it was accepted, socially accepted.
So then maybe that's why someone would have been mechanech his child that way.
That's right. That's what I'm speaking to.
So it explains why he would have done it, but it doesn't explain that there would be a mitzvah of chinuch to do it. But it does explain why someone would do it, because it was socially typical.
No, they start to hold that it could be I wouldn't say requirement, but in order to teach your kids something.
Since positive, you know it's going to happen, and since it's likely that the child's going to be a Nazir, they felt that chinuch should apply to that as well.
Yeah.
I heard. Okay. Okay. So let's see what the Tosfos says. We learned about it again. B'noi in bitay loy zogt the heilige Tosfos the kach halachi that's halach lo moshe. Sinai b'noi the shaykh b'mitzvos l'chsheyigdal mutal la'av lachan. Why is the mitzvah of chinuch only to be mechanech your son, but not your daughter? Because your son is mechuyev in all mitzvah says. A daughter is not mechuyev on mitzvah says as mangram. Aval bitay loy. Frek Tosfos tema hadamer ba'al makatim oichel nevelas ein besen mitzvah alav la frishay. You see that there is no mitzvah of chinuch because we don't have to stop a child from eating the velas. We Amar Rabbi Yosy Bechanina, I guess according to Shlokish, never mind making him refrain, stopping a child, restraining a child from being over nisr. You're even supposed to train a child to get up and go and do mitzvahs. The concept of chinuch is only training him bekum v'asei to do a mitzvah. Yeah, there might be a reason to stop a child from being over an aveir, but that's not the mitzvah of chinuch. And in the end of the last parak of Yuma, where it talks about training a child to fast on Yom Kippur, well, that's also restraining him from doing an isser from eating. Zoktoisus, that's not how it's perceived. Hainu ki mitzvah v'inisa. That's a mitzvah to say of v'inisa misnafsher say. Oidamari, the chinuch lo shayach el ba'av. It's only the father who's mechuyev in chinuch, even though the wife does most of it. Aval v'inish achrina lo shayach. It only applies to the father of the child, not to a third party. Here we say there's no chiyuv of chinuch on his daughter. Yet in Yuma, there is a mitzvah to be mechanech your daughter in the mitzvah of Nisam for Yom Kippurim. You're going to have to find some reason why Yom Kippur is different, and Tosfos does not tell us why Yom Kippur might be different. Okay? I think that's weiter. Even mitzvah shaloyas man grama, it seems like there's no mitzvah chinuch on girls. Although Rav Moshe says, like I think I mentioned yesterday, that avada for ikar emuna, for sure there's a chiyuv chinuch, and nowadays chinuch of balish is mandatory, since regardless the government would force your daughter to go to school, and we're fortunate that instead of sending them to a school where they would be taught values that maybe don't agree with the Torah, we're able to make our own schools. For there, for sure, is a chiyuv of chinuch on banis. Okay, so let's see the Gemara weiter. So the Gemara asks now, Bishlam or Rabbi Yochanan? Could be. I don't know the law. Bishlam or Rabbi Yochanan? The Amar Halacha ibn Nazir. Bishlam according to Rabbi Yochanan, who says halachi ibn Nazir, amtu lahachi b'nayin b'tayloi. That would explain why b'nayin b'tayloi. Allah shlakish afilu b'tay, kasaver b'noi chayav l'chancha b'tay ein chayav l'chancha. Bishlam Rabbi Yochanan Amar halachi ibn Nazir. Bishlam according to Rabbi Yochanan, who says it's halacha l'Moshe Messinai. Well, therefore halachi b'naziris in b'nedarim loy. There's no reason that we would typically understand. Why is it that you have to be mechanech a child in Naziris and not in other Nedarim? If it's halacha l'Moshe Messinai, so then that's how it's dictated. Elul Rishlakish, afilu Nedarim nami loy. Afilu Nedarim nami. There should even be a chiyuv to be mechanech a child in Nedarim, just like you're being mechanech them in Naziris. Why do we only find this halacha related to Naziris and not Nedarim? Zok to Gemara. In fact, it's true. You do have to be mechanech your children for Nedarim as well. It's pashut by Nedarim, where the Mishnah didn't even have to mention it. The less la nivel. There's no nivel. We're not putting the child into a situation where they can't drink wine, where there's inconvenience. There it's clear. There's a chiyuv to be mechanech your children. Elafilu b'naziris to islay nivel, even naziris, which involves nivel. Because they're not going to have to cut their hair, they're not going to have to drink wine. Nevertheless, there's still a chiyuv to be mechanechim in mitzvahs. Okay. Bishlam Rabbi Yochanan Amar Halachi b'Nazir Hanu dekatani micha oisha michu kroiva. Bishlam according to Rabbi Yochanan. Where's halacha l'Moshe Messinai? So there's also halacha l'Moshe Messinai. There's also halacha l'Moshe Messinai that the child can reject it, or the Kraven can reject it. According to Rabbi Yosy Bechanina Amar Shlakish, who holds the din of chinuch, call kimin hain Kraven the Amar lay sigmar mitzvahs. The relatives have a right to reject my chinuch. I have a chiyuv to be mechanech my children. Why in the world should Michu Kroivov, why should Kroivim have anything to say here? They should have no right to prevent my chinuch. So according to Rish Lakish, and this is all about chinuch, how could you understand how the Kroivim can prevent this, can be moicha? Zok the Gemara, kasavar kol chinuch l'lei chashiv l'nichalei. Any chinuch that's not chashiv, they're not happy with. What does this mean? Chinuch l'lei chashiv. So Tosfos, I believe, has two pshatim. So let's have a look at Tosfos. Kol chinuch, kasavar kol chinuch l'lei chashiv, kol chinuch naziris. And here Tosfos sticks in bizyonehu. The Megaleich Sairoi. So chinuch that's not chashuv means chinuch that leads to an embarrassing situation, such as Naziris, where the child's going to have to shave his head bald. After the Naziris, that they could stop. And the child doesn't want that. The child can be moicha on this type of chinuch, as well as the craving, because the father is doing something to the child that the child really doesn't want, embarrassing for the child. That's why they can stop it. That's why maybe chinuch wouldn't apply here. That's one pshat in how to understand this Gemara. V'yesh gershon deloy chashiva. V'hachi perushay. Kol chinuch hu l'hachshivai. Chinuch is to make him proud, to make him confident in Yiddishkeit. V'zeh b'zhoynehu loy. This is being mevazah child mishum hachi megaleach. This is something that's not going to make the child proud of his Yiddishkeit, and therefore he could be moicha. So it's both the same idea. The father's right or responsibility to be mechach the child ends where it's something that's humiliating for the child. We're going to discuss Pais in just a second. Zakmar bish lamal Rabbi Yochanan, Damar Alachi ben Nazir. According to Rabbi Yochanan, where midaraisa he has a right to make this child a Nazir, and therefore there's a heter to shave off Allah's head, which is also over loisakivu pasreishchem, is cutting off his pious. If it's only chinuch, and chinuch is midarabanan. I hear you're making the over loisakivu pas roishem, and for the Gemara, kasavar akavas kol roish midirabanan. He holds that the Israel loisakivu is only if you cut your payas off, but you leave other hair. If you take all the hair of your head off and there's no hair left, there is no issue daraisa of loisakivu pas roishem. It's only an issue midirabanan. But for chinuch midirabanan, the mitzvah to be mechanech his child is also midrabanan. Vasi chinuch derabanan, the dachi hakafa derabanan. The mitzvah of chinuch, which is only midrabanan, will be able to be doicha the iser to cut off his payas. That's also only midrabanan. For the Gemara, we have bigger problems. Therefore, he can protest and maisi carbon. And he'll bring a carbon at the end of his Naziris, because that is the process. At the end of Naziris, you have to bring carbonates, and you could be Megaleach, even though the Ishav Lasakifu, you could bring carbonates, because that's the Allah of a Nazir, and this Allah of Sinai makes this child into a Nazir deraisa. And Rabbi Yosy B'Chanina Amar Shlakish, who says Kedei L'chacha b'mitzvahs, which is only a Derabanan. So really the Naziris is not a Naziris. So if that's the case, at the end of his Naziris, you've explained how you could give him a haircut because it's only a drabanan, but you're also bringing karbanos. Hakamaisi chulun lazara. That for sure is a problem. How could you allow him to bring the karbanos at the end of the Naziris? He's bringing chulun lazara. And for the Gemara, Rish Lakish is going to have to hold kasav chulun bazara lav deraisa. He's going to have to hold that the Isra of chulun bazara is not deraisa. So he's bringing karbanos that aren't really karbanos. So how does that work? You bring carbonas that aren't carbonas. So Tosfos explains exactly how you would deal with it. Zok Tosfos kasaver chulun shenishchatu bazar lav deraisa. Bein behava also. Sayin actually bringing them. Ubein the shori la oichlam. You're even allowed to eat them because they eat those carbonas. The shlomim is going to be eaten. The chat is going to be eaten. V'chein muter lahavi halechem v'azroya b'shelam and ha'aylu lahanaf bazar. You're allowed to bring the lechem that comes with the Shalmi Nazir, and there's Rai B'Sheila, and you're allowed to make tenufa in the Azar, because there's no problem with the Raisa of Chulun Bazar. But how are you going to burn anything on the Mizbeach? The Ha'emurim Shel Chatas, how are you going to burn those on the Mizbeach? Ikal Meimer Yalim L'Shem Eitzim. Bring them up, but not as meat. Bring them up as fuel. So you're not being makriv of them. You're just using them as fuel on the Mizbeach, like a piece of wood. Adam Yizra'ik L'Shem Mayim. And when you make this rika, it's like I'm washing off the Mizbeach. The Eilu Shlomim Yasa L'Shem Nedava, that could be L'Shem Karban Sedava. So it's not Chum Azara, and to make the Karbanis work out, they shouldn't passel. So you use these different ways to make it work. Okay, Zok Gemara, we still have another problem. So we dealt with the problem of Chulun Bazara, but we have another problem. Zok Gemara, Bishlam Rabbi Yochanan Amar Halachi ben Nazir, Ahachi ki metamem ma'isi Karban Siparim. When the Nazir becomes Tameh, and this Nazir, if he becomes Tameh, he'll have to go through the regular process of a Nazir Tameh, and part of that is after he's Matar, he has to bring birds, Echad L'chatos, Echad L'ayla. V'achal Kayin, Malika, and the Kayin is going to eat this bird, even though there was no Shechita done on the bird, rather there's a Malika done on the bird, but the Balt is a carbon, by a carbon, Malika is the right way to kill the bird, and therefore the Kayin is allowed to eat it. Rabbi Yosy b'Chanina, that Batim, there's no chiv to bring this karbanis at all, because the whole Nazir is only with their abana. The whole Nazir is only al tchinach. Come to chayis if this child becomes tamei, and now you want to bring the karbanis. Those karbanis, those birds will be nevela, because a malika was done when shchita was required, and the kohanim are going to eat it. So how is it possible for the kohanim to eat a carbon if it's a nevela? Omer shlakish. And for the Gemara, no. He'll hold like Rabbi Yosy by Yehuda, who holds with the Raisa. You don't need shchita for a bird, like a fish. You just get the blood out, and you're done. The Chulun Bazar love the Raisa, and Chulun Bazar love the Raisa. So in fact, the carbon that this Nazir is going to bring is going to be not a carbon. It's going to just be killing a bird and eating it. And when the kohen eats the bird, it won't be usher, because there is no shchita required. And Toshus tells us. Kasavar Rabbi Yosy b'Chanina ein shchita life in the Torah. All you need is to get the blood out. So you have to puncture the simonim in order that the blood should drain out. Now the Gemara asks that since you made malika not shchita, it'll be a nevela. Frank tells us earlier it should be a treifa as well. The mitzvah of a carbon is b'malika, but that's not a way to prepare a bird of chulun to be eaten. There's not a problem that you're eating a treifa. The malika in the earth. Really, malika is not only an avela, it should be treifa as well, because you first, the kohen's nail first ruptures the spinal cord, which makes the animal into a treifa, and the animal is only considered dead after the simonim are punctured. Zok Toisves, the ikal ameimar, the sover like command omar machzar simonim achayre oyer. It's possible that this Gemara holds that when you make malika, you actually have to dislocate the simonim that are cut, that are normally in front of the backbone, and you pull them around so that you puncture those before you break the neck of the bird. So therefore, it's only a nevela, not a treifa. So now the Gemara came up with a new chiddush that Rabbi Yosy b'Chanina holds that bringing a carbon that's chulun to the Azara is not an issur d'oraisa, and therefore you could suspend it when the Rabbanan are creating an Naziris for chiduch, and the same rule is with a bird. A bird does not need shchita mid'oraisa, so therefore the kohen will be able to eat this bird, even though with the Rabbanan it would have required a shchita. Nevertheless, because of the Naziris of the Rabbanan for chiduch, the kohen can eat this bird as well. So Zok the Gemara, v'savar Rabbi Yosy hachi. does Rabbi Yosy actually hold of these two halachas that chulun ba'azara is not deraisa and shchita la'oif is not deraisa? But Tanya we learned Rabbi Yosy bar Yehuda, and it's a shaila if this is a brisa or if it's a gemara, if we're speaking about a Tana Rabbi Yosy bar Yehuda, or if we're speaking about a gemara. Tosfos has an arichas about it, but the gemara asks on this Rabbi Yosy bar Yehuda, who the gemara is saying now holds that in shchita la'oif min Torah, and there's no issue of chulun ba'azara midiraisa. He said as follows: Minayin l'chatas ha'oif she ba ala sofek she'ein nechelas. How do we know that if a woman brings a chatas ha'oif because it's a sofek that it cannot be eaten? For instance, a woman brings a chatas ha'oif when she's a yeledes. What if she was a sofek yeledes? We weren't sure if whatever came out of her was a vlad or not, and therefore we're not sure if she's mechuyev a chatas ha'oif. Well, the halach is you bring it ala sofek. How do you know that it cannot be eaten? Talmud Lomer, it says as follows: in Parshas Mitzayah, it says, I could be in Nazir, it says the Torah is comparing the chiyuv of karbanos of a male to the chiyuv of karbanos that a woman has. Makish nekeva lezacher. Ma zacher may be carbon ala vadai, just like a male brings a carbon on vadai, which there's different approaches here how to understand it. Either it means if he eats chaylev v'shogig bevadai, he brings a carbon chatos, or it could be referring to if he was over having relations with a zava bevadai, then he brings a carbon. Af nekeva mevi a carbon alavadai. So too, a woman brings a carbon chatos if she was vadai over in a or if she's a vadai yeledes, she'll bring the carbon chatos. Uma zacher maybe ala sofek. Just like a zacher brings a carbon for a sofek isser, there's something called an asham toli that you bring if there's a sofek if he was over an isser. Af nekeva maybe ala sofek. So too, a nekeva will bring an asham toli. Uma zacher miminchu maybe ala vadai, maybe ala sofek. Just like a zacher, the same species of animal that he brings for a carbon chatos, he will also bring for a nosham toli. Af nekeva, so to a nekeva, mimin shemevi ala vadai, mevi ala sofek. So a woman who's a vadai yeledes brings a chatasai. So if she's a sofek yeledes, she'll also bring a knife. Frek the Gemara, I ma zacher mevi carbon v'nechal, af nekeva mevi a carbon v'nechal. Just like when someone brings a nashim toli, the nashim toli is eaten by the kohen. It's a regular kosher or carbon. So say that when a chatas oif is brought on behalf of a woman, and it's only a suffix if she's mechuyev that carbon chatos, that bird should be able to be eaten. Amrit, Zokt, Rabbi Yosy bar Yehuda, no, you don't say that. Loi im amrit bezacher, don't say that just because by a zachar it's eaten, the carbon in mitzvah is eaten, shekein iser echad, because there's only one iser involved in if the nashim toloi is brought. Toimar ben nekeva sheshnei isurin, and the keva has two isurin. So what is the iser echad by a zachar? It will be chulun lazar. What are the two isurin by a carbon chatas oif that's really not mechuyivin? What are the two isurin involved? My shnei isurin lav isur nevela v'chulun bazar. So you see clearly that Rabbi Yosy holds that there's an isur nevela and there's an isur of chulun bazar. So how could you tell me that according to Rabbi Yosy we don't have, there's no isur chulun lazar b'deraisa, and there's no isur of, there's no chiyuv of shchitas ha'oif b'deraisa? Here you say clearly, you see that he didn't want to make the same hekesh to allow the chatas ha'oif to be eaten because there's two isurim here. So you have a kloraya. In fact, the Rabbi Yosy holds that you do have to shecht it. So our kasha is back in place. Our kasha is back in place. How could you make someone a nazir machmas chinuch and its karbanos aren't really karbanos? We're going to have a problem of chulun lazar. We're going to have a problem of the milika of the oif would be a nevela. And the Chanami, So the Ashram Tali is eaten. I hear. I hear. I hear. So you're saying a national is even better, but you zikr here why by the suffix chatas oif why it shouldn't be. This has to zikr. You're saying by ashram even misafik there's a real chiyuv. Okay, so Frank Rab Acha, she's really just saying a teretz. He's asking a kasha on the kasha because he's Jewish, and that's how Jews answer questions with questions. Maybe it is only midrabanan. Maybe it's only midrabanan. Fact, I don't understand. We're discussing here a hekish of a deraisa de kalimud. So how could the derabanan undo that? Zok Tosus, maybe the Bryce is just saying that me'ikra din avada you can eat the chatazoi. Maybe the Bryce is just saying that midirabanan we wouldn't let you eat this chatazoi because it's a suffix. So Viter, you don't have a raya from here that midaraisa there's a din of shchita on oif. Zok Gemara leime katana. Let's suggest that the machlokes that we have between a Berechim and a Shlokish about whether or not this naziris that a father can impose on his children is totally in a machlokes tonight. It says in the Brisa as follows: Ad masay mader es benoi benazir. Until what age is there a mitzvah of chinuch? Can you? I shouldn't say that. Until what age can a father impose naziris on his child? Ad shiyavish shtei cyrus. That's only until the child is a gadol, until he brings shtei cyrus, until bar mitzvah. Divei Rabbi Yosy Yehuda Omer, which is a year or maybe even more earlier, which is where he's at the point where he appreciates what the nether is, and at that point, since he could make his own naziris, his father can no longer make a naziris for him. Let's say that the machlokes between Rabbi and Rabbi Yosy is as follows: the Rabbi savar halacha hi benazir. Rabbi holds that it's halacha l'Moshe Messinai that you could make naziris for your son. And therefore, even though he's at the age where he makes his own adorim, which means you shouldn't be making adorim from anymore, still Madir Lo Ba'azul Adamashi Shtei Cyrus. The Allah Moshe Messinai says that even though you shouldn't be making nidarim for your child anymore, because they make their own nidarim, so you can't make nidarim for them anymore. But the Gzeres HaKosov of the Allah Moshe Messinai says that until your child is an adult, you could make a naziris for him. Rabbi Yosy Rabbi Yehuda, which means that Rabbi would hold like Rabbi Yochanan. Rabbi Yosy Bar Yehuda, the Amar Achi Gila Anis Nadarim, he holds you can only make a naziris for your son only up until the child is around 12, when the child can make their own nadarim. That would hold like Rish Lakish. Savar Kedei Lechan Chay B'Mitzvahs. The Chim and the Navik Mershu say once this child went out of your rishus for nadarim because the child could make their own nadarim, Sulei Mechayiv. Therefore, you're not mechayiv in making naziris for him. Zok to Gemara Amri Loi. Let's not say that that's the machlokes. Rather, the Chul Alma Halacha Hi Benazir. Everybody, Sai Rabbi and Sai Rabbi Yosy can hold like Rabbi Yochanan. That it's Halacha L'Moshe Messinai. V'hacha, what's the machlokes Rabbi and Rabbi Yosy Yehuda over here? V'hacha b'mufla samach lish kamifilki. Their argument is, how does it work when a mufla samach lish, meaning he's not an adult yet, but he has the intelligence of an adult, and he understands and appreciates the severity of the Nadarim, so therefore his Nadarim are good. How does that work? Rabbi Savar Mufla Samach Leish Dirabanan. Rabbi holds that Mufla Samach Leish, that he can make Nadarim, it's not really Midaraisa, it's a Chumah Dirabanan that he has to stick to his commitments that he made. Therefore, the also Diraisa, Dachi Dirabanan. Since the right that the father has to make his son into a Nazir is a din daraisa, it's Allah Moshe Messinai, so it will be doicha the din derabanan of mufla samach lish. Rabbi Yosy Yehuda savar mufla samach lish daraisa. Mufla samach lish is daraisa, and even the daraisa right that a father has to be mazer his son because of the Allah Moshe Messinai, it will not trump the daraisa halacha that a child at 12 already makes his own adar. That was one approach. Overruled. The Ibai Seima, or you could say the Chula Alma Kilachancha b'mitzvahs. You could say everybody holds like Rosh Lakish. Umufla Samach Lish Dirabonani. And everybody holds that a Mufla Samach Lish makes Nadarim is also only Midrabanan. Rabbi Savar Asi Chinuch Derabanan, V'dachi Mufla Samach Lish Derabanan. Rabbi holds the Chiv of Chinuch that a father has, even though it's only Derabanan, it could trump the Derabanan, the Halacha that a child's Nadarim are valid. Rabbi Yehuda, the Amar Achigir, the Anish Nadarim, Kasavar, Le Asi Chinuch Derabanan, V'dachi Mufla Samach Lish. Rabbi Yehuda holds that Chinuch Derabanan will not be doicha that. And therefore, the father cannot be Makabal Nadarim for his son once his son becomes a Mufla, a Samach Lish. From the Ois. So we've already established that Rabbi Yosy bar Yehuda and Rabbi are definitely not arguing in the machlokes of Rabbi Yochanan and Rish Lakish as to whether or not the Kabbalas Nazir that a father does for his son, if that's a halacha l'mashim shina deraisa, if it's only derabban. That's not totally zebazah. But maybe Rabbi and Rabbi Yehuda are totally in a different machlokes tonight. The Tanya we learned. Ma'aseh Rabbi Chanina shehediru alvav ben Nazir. Rabbi Chanina, his father was mother him in his ears, just like our Mishnah says that he can. And the day that he made his son into a Nazir, Rabbi Chanina was brought to Rabbi Gamliel for an examination to see if he's an adult or not, whether or not the Kabbalas Nazirs that his father made for him, whether it's valid. Either Leda and Hevi Shtei Sayers Imloy Hevi. Rabbi Gamliel was being invited him to see if he's an adult or not, because if he was already an adult and he brought two Cyrus, the father's Kabbalas Naziris would not have been valid. And Rabbi Yosy said, "Leda emegia la'oines nedarim imla." That's not that we're checking Rabbi Chanina for. He wasn't 13 yet. He was only 12, and Rabbi Gamliel was questioning him to see if he has wisdom, to see if he's minus nedarim. Amar loy. This Rabbi Chanina was a smart child, and he said, "Rabbi, I know you're putting a lot of effort into checking me out because you want to know if I'm a Nazir or not. Don't worry about it. I'll fix your suffix. Im katanani, if I'm a minor, eya b'shvil abba, then I'm a Nazir anyway because my father was makabel Naziris for me. And im gadlani, but if I'm in fact an adult, eya b'shvil atzamoy, I'm being makabel my own Naziris. So you don't have to worry about it. Amar Rabbi Gamliel v'noshkei al roishai. Rabbi Gamliel got up and kissed Rabbi Chanina on his head. Wow, what a wonderful child. Amar, he said, Muvdach ani bazeh shemeira halacha b'Yisrael. I'm sure that Rabbi Chanina one day is going to be a meira halacha. I guess the best thing to do is avoid tzveikus and clarify things. And you saw Rabbi Chanina out of appreciation to make something clear that we shouldn't have to start making assessments. Amru, they said, it didn't take a long time before Rabbi Chanina became a Meir Hira. Yeah. So let's see. So the Gemara wants to say that this machlokes should be totally in the machlokes of whether or not you become a gadol. Well, it makes perfect sense over here because that's why we had two nuschos. Was Rabbi Gamliel checking him out to see if he was a mufla samach leish, or was Gamliel checking him out to see if he was an adult? So that seems to be the same machlokes as Rabbi Yosy bar Yehuda and Rabbi, because the two different times that they argue about is in fact what the two nuschos are here about what Rabbi Gamliel was checking Rabbi Chanina for. Zok to Gemara, Bishlama Rabbi Yosy bar Yehuda, or according to the Bach, it's Rabbi Yosy. Hainu de Ka'amar. That's why it makes sense why Rabbi Chanina said, "Im katan ani eya b'shvil abba." If I'm a katan, I want to be a Nazir. Why? Because my father was makabel Naziris for me. Ella, let me just look at the base. Ella, im gadlani, and he's talking also im gadlani eya b'shvil atzmi. Ella the Rabbi de Amar. According to Rabbi who holds achi yavish te sayros, until the child is a complete adult. Bim gadol ani eya b'shvil atzmi. So what does he mean to say that if I'm an adult, I'm a kabel my own naziris? Haber shu say do avilakam. He's still in the rishus of his father. Zokt toisvis v'mayar rishus the avklaim afilu have a gadol. Even if he was a gadol, he's still in the rishus of his father. The kasol gadaitach the gadlani hanu gadol le'inyan the nidre neder. when the boy said im gadol ani, if I'm a gadol, he meant if I'm a gadol lagabi being makabel naziris upon himself. So therefore, you're checking if I have simonim or not, and I'm saying if I'm a gadol, I'm a kabel naziris. But what does that mean? How could you be makabel the naziris if you're a gadol, meaning you're 12 because you're a mufla samach leish, danim shegil anish nedarim, but ad sheyave beis Cyrus matzi maderle. But the father has the right to be mother his son until he brings beis Cyrus, according to the shita that's the time that the father can be mother him. So Tanakama Amar leidim heavy beis Cyrus. So the problem here is what does it mean if I'm a gadol eya b'shvil atzmai? When the child says if I'm a gadol, the pashtus is he meant if I'm already a mufla samach leish. If I'm a mufla samach leish, I'm not going to be a nazir b'shvil atzmai. I could still be a nazir because of my father, according to the shita that my father has the right to make me into a nazir up until I bring two sires, up until my bar mitzvah. Ella, you have to say the Amar ahei b'shvil abba, ahei b'shvil atzmi. So what did he say? He said ahei b'shvil abba, ahei b'shvil kloimar. Like Amar, dim katan shay nidre neder, dim gadol shenidre neder. He didn't mean to say that if I'm 12, then it's b'shvil atzmi. That's not what he meant. What he meant is elim katnani shurish avi alai. If my father still has a shusami, meaning I'm under bar mitzvah, I didn't bring two sires, I knew atavo shtei sires. Then I'm a nazir because of my father's kabbalah. But I did come in gadol. When he said if I'm a gadol, he didn't mean if I'm a gadol, if I'm 12 years old, if I'm mufla samach leish. He means Yeshayim the like either you're not gersh at all, that he didn't say him gadlani, or Yeshayim Ratzalaimer bim gadol shavish shtei sires. Maybe what he meant is if I brought shtei sires, then I should be a nazir on my own. The mother benoi aravo shtei sires. Okay, gewaltig. Zog to Gemara. Eising shtei sires meikara koim b'naziris delay. If so, halacha l'maisa. What happens if it turns out that at the time of the kabbalah naziris of his father, this child had two sires? If that was the case, then the naziris is the child's own naziris, right? So from day one, the naziris that this child was a nazir was from his own naziris. Ula b'soif. What if he didn't bring two sires until 30 days after the father's kabbalah naziris? Then come naziris davua. Then the full naziris that he kept was the naziris of his father. So he either had a full naziris that he made, so therefore he could bring all the kabbalah to discharge it, or he had a full naziris that his father made, and he could bring the full the kabbalah of naziris. But the icy b'mitzi my. What if he ended up becoming a gadol in the middle of the 30-day term? It's nishteh nishteher. He doesn't have a full term of naziris from his father, nor does he have a full term of naziris from his own. So he doesn't have any. How can he bring kabbalah? He doesn't have a full naziris.
If it's from his father,
No, because the naziris will stop once he's a gadol. The top shot if his nazir started 15 days before it became a gadol, it goes 30 days. No, the father's nazir stops because the father has no shlita once he's an adult. So therefore, it's nishteh nishteh. So Rabbi Yosy bar Yehuda, why is that? So let's see the Tosfos inside. So Kum Dehois, his father never had the right to be Makabal Naziris for him. Therefore, Koi bin Naziris today. Vinodroi b'shvalatzmai. Vila b'soif, but if he was able to keep the full term of Naziris, and only then he became an adult. If he only had Cyrus at the end of 30 days, then we know for sure the full Naziris was because of his fathers. If he found Simonim in middle of the term of Naziris, how in the world was he able to fulfill the terms of the Naziris? the Naziris of that his father was makabel for him. Once he becomes a full adult, that Naziris is no longer there. So how will he be able to bring karbanis at the end of that term? And you can't say the diet his das was shafilu yavi simonim shalo yavsik naziris aviv. You cannot say that his das is that even if he brings simonim, I don't want to make my own naziris. I want my father's naziris to continue. That wouldn't work because mikal makom ein royu lahavi carbon b'shvil naziris aviv levad. The chiyuv naziris that his father put on him would not have been enough to trigger his bringing of the karbanis. The gam b'shvil atzmai kivin shalai pirish, and him as well would not be able to bring karbanis for his own kabbalas naziris. Okay, let's stop here because it's already 6:52, and we'll pick up on this kasha tomorrow. Shkoyach.
Kama sisi, kama tunataka